So I just read on LinkedIn that in the developing world, um, literacy rates are actually going down. And I find that not surprising, if I'm being honest with you. I feel like we've commoditized the world enough, okay? I don't think we need more entertainment. It's kind of fascinating, actually. I've noticed that there is a bit of there's almost like an inverse correlation between the future prosperity of the next generation and how well the stock market is doing. In other words, the more screwed younger people are, the better the stock market does. And this makes a lot of sense, right? Because you are extracting value from people, from their intellectual um, abilities, and turning that into profit. What do I mean by this? When you look at a company like Meta, right? Like you have Instagram and all this kind of stuff. Um, The problem here is that they are advertising to children, right? They're advertising to 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds. Sorry, I shouldn't be rude about it. I mean, they're teenagers, I get that, but their brains aren't fully formed yet, right? Like they're still kids. And that's really the problem is that instead of reading, instead of studying, instead of socializing, these companies are incentivized to keep these kids on their phones for as long as possible. Now, what do you think that's going to do, right? It's going to destroy their future, right? A lot of these kids have trouble with reading, they have trouble with math, they have trouble understanding even basic concepts, and it's not even their fault, right? And I would even argue it's not even their parents' fault. The parents have no clue how powerful this technology is. In fact, I'd argue a lot of them are victims themselves. So, why is it that we're okay with this? Why is it that we're okay with a world in which we are effectively stealing from the future? We're stealing money from the future. We're stealing wealth from the future to enrich ourselves today, right? And the fact of the matter is, a lot of the people who are shareholders of Meta are boomers, right? Like they're people who are older. They are probably invested in some index fund, like they work with a financial advisor, and their retirements are being funded by essentially essentially they're being funded by kids who are sacrificing their futures for entertainment, right? And when you think about it like that, it actually is almost, you could think of it like a zero-sum game, right? Like the more that these kids spend time online, the wealthier these older generations get, even though they don't even realize it. They don't realize that they are it's not that they're stealing from the future, but they don't realize that their wealth is actually supposed to be, you know, something that is realized in the future as opposed to right now. Think about it like this. If you have a kid who is an aspiring doctor, right? And they work really hard, they study, they do well, they're taking really challenging courses in school. Well, by the time they're 30, they're doctors now, maybe they work in a hospital, maybe they work in a clinic, I really don't know. But they're making well over $100,000 per year. They're probably making multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. I think some doctors actually make 300 or even 400,000 a year. That money belongs to that person now. But if that kid, instead of applying themselves in school, gets distracted by Instagram Reels, gets distracted by TikTok, well, that's a problem, right? Because now they're not going to become doctors. They're not going to make that kind of money. They're not going to do as well. So now what, right? Um, and I know that some people would argue, like, well, if that's the case, then, even if the average intelligence goes down, you'll still have the top of the top who become doctors. But think about it like this: if people aren't able to critically think, where does that wealth, like, how do you create new wealth, right? Like, where do the entrepreneurs come from, right? Like, where do the writers come from? Like, there are certain jobs where you actually it's not a zero-sum game, it's a positive sum game, but that only applies if people are able to come up with new ideas. I mean, think about it like this. If every person on Earth was able to come up with some unique idea that benefits society and they act on it, think about how wealthy we would be, right? But those ideas aren't able to form if you don't read, if you don't do your work, if you don't think, right? And that's what's going on. We're essentially okay with kids being brainwashed, and now our future's at stake, right?